guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm absolutely thrilled to be in Wakefield on this Justice Sunday with you. I think that's not on, but I'm just going to move it over just in case. All right, I'm going to turn on what is my watch so that I can time myself here. All right, so the great Stephen Hawking, who unfortunately left us a couple of weeks ago, is known to have said it would not be much of a universe if it wasn't home to the people that we love. Now today I want to talk to you about environmental justice, about the globe, about climate change, and about climate justice. And I want to talk about the profound impact that a more loving, people-centered, and more connected approach to climate justice has had for me in my personal life and in my work. Now at UUSC, our climate justice program, which you can read about in the handouts that you have in your order of service, and we also have a table downstairs Charlie and I can tell you a little bit about, is focused right now on a topic called climate force displacement, an issue of climate force displacement. Now this is when people are having to flee or to leave their homes, specifically because of the threats and the impacts of climate change. And I'm not going to dwell on a lot of statistics, but just to give you a sense, approximately 1 person per second is displaced from their home because of either a natural disaster or another kind of violence, like a war, for instance. But the majority of that number are actually people displaced by natural disasters that are often linked to climate change. Now, just to give you a sense, the most widely cited estimate, and there are many, many estimates, of the people that will be displaced by climate change specifically by 2050, so we're only talking a generation, 30 years, is about 200 million people in the world. So this is a huge, huge problem. And these numbers, as high as they are, don't actually account for what a lot of our partners that we work with at UUSC are dealing with, which is what we call slow onset impacts, so like sea level rising because of climate change and inundating your home, so you have to move or you have to relocate. Now, individual households and entire communities are already relocating their homes and their communities right now because of climate change. In the South Pacific, this is a major issue. I actually have the globe here, and I had never been to the South Pacific until recently. I'll tell you a little bit about my trip. But this area, obviously, basically to the east of Australia, has many, many different nations in here. And Papua New Guinea, for instance, is one of them that I visited. Kiribati is another one. Very, very small island nations, and home to many indigenous people, native peoples who have been there for thousands of years. It's a huge issue in the South Pacific because of sea level rise especially, but you also have communities in Alaska that are having to relocate, especially, again, native Alaskan communities because of permafrost melting, the Arctic melting, and their inability to maintain life where they are because of erosion. So I'm going to be really honest with you about this topic, and this is something that you heard my kind of like crazy pedigree. Somebody with that kind of an academic background, it's hard to say I was really ignorant about this topic. This is not something I knew a lot about until about 1.5 years or so ago. And I think there's a reason for that, not just that we don't all know everything, but I think it's in large part because I had engaged in environmental work and the way that I had engaged in environmental work and climate change work, I had always considered myself an environmentalist, right? And I certainly lived my life that way. But until recent years, I hadn't really thought about my environmental work as being something I did with other people. It was sort of a private thing I did at home, choices that I made, that sort of thing. And I didn't have a sense of connection to other people with my climate and environmental work. And I realize now that's actually pretty common. It's one of the things that's grown out of the way that we appreciate the environment and the way that we sort of think that the environment is important in our cultural backgrounds. So I want to give a couple of different perspectives on the environment today as well. First, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm feeling very sort of connected already to all of you. We've heard a little bit about family members in Vermont. I grew up in Vermont. We've certainly been talking a lot about this kind of environmental work. So a little bit about myself, just to give some context. So I grew up in central Vermont, very rural place, up a dirt road, beautiful dirt road, where we had lovely foliage in the fall. And I had 3 sisters. So the woods that surrounded our house were really where I could go to have any kind of private time when I was a kid. I'm seeing people nod. This is kind of like a familiar thing. One of my favorite places to go when I was a kid was actually about halfway up a pine tree that was just to the southwest of our house. And I could climb up its spindly little branches, and I could look out and I could see the house and what was going on there, but I didn't have to engage with them. Or I could just gaze out at the beautiful blue sky and the mountains that surrounded us. Now, environmental historian Bill Cronin, who's out at the University of Wisconsin, he has taken some time to identify the different narratives that nature holds for Americans. And one of the really powerful narratives is nature as our cathedral, right? Nature as essentially like a sanctuary, like the church. And that is definitely one that most resonated with me, I think, when I was growing up. This nature was my cathedral. Well, just one little story. When I was 10, I was climbing down from my tree, my special tree, and I slipped and I fell down onto this little maple sapling that was trying to grow, and I just snapped it right in half. Poor tree, snapped right in half. And I was devastated kid. I rushed inside to gather first aid supplies for my victim, right? And I don't actually know whether my parents didn't allow me to get the actual first aid supplies, the ace bandages and the medical tape and that, or if we didn't actually have any around. But I distinctly remember marching back out into the woods about 5 minutes later with a roll of toilet paper that I was sure was going to help me to save this tree. I did my best to set the limb, to wrap the toilet paper all around it, left it like that, and gave it a big hug. I was literally like a tree hugger growing up in Vermont. And for me, in my earliest understandings of the environment, it was really about the tree, right? The tree was part of my holy space, my cathedral. The nature that I valued was there, and it was near me, but it was sort of separate from me. And it was not about people, to be honest. It was really about the natural world, but not people. The woods were literally where I went to get away from people, to escape. And don't get me wrong, I still use the woods to get away from people, especially go out to the Medford Fells and try to sort of have some quiet time. I'm thankful that at least I was compassionate, right? In my youth, I felt that I, the human, could be a threat to the tree, a threat to the environment. And I think that's that is a real threat. People like me, my clumsy boots, our clear cutting, our pollution, certainly are a threat to the environment. But the notion that we're separate from it, and that it doesn't have something to do with humans and people, is really an issue of perspective. So for instance, it's a very different perspective from, for instance, the Onondaga traditional perspective. Onondaga Native Americans have a prayer of thanksgiving that includes this invocation. Standing around us, we see the trees. The earth has many families of trees, who each have their own instructions and uses. Some provide shelter and shade, others fruit and beauty, and many wonderful things. The maple is the leader of the trees, to recognize its gift of sugar when the people need it most. Many peoples of the world recognize a tree as a symbol of peace and strength. With one mind, we greet and thank the tree life. Now our minds are one. In this framing, trees aren't separate and apart from us to be revered or to be exploited, right? But rather part of a web of interconnectedness that we've already heard talked about today, right? That links the earth and all the living things in mutual obligations. Now, the cathedral view of the environment is also too limited for the climate justice movement, I'll say, which incorporates justice for people into our solutions for climate change. Now, as Mary Robinson, who's the former president of Ireland, former chairwoman of the UN Human Rights Council, she's defined what climate justice is for us. Climate justice links human rights and development to achieve a human-centered approach, safeguarding the rights of the most vulnerable people and sharing the burdens and benefits of climate change and its impacts equitably and fairly. We don't often think about the benefits of climate change, but I think as we talk a little bit today, we'll recognize that we've actually benefited substantially from some of the things that have caused climate change as well. By this measure, the key to real progress on climate justice or even climate change means centering people and our mutual relationships with people all over the planet. Because we know that our current course, as we've already mentioned today, is destructive, it's poisoning, it's deadly to our planet and to other people. Now, I'll assert here also, and this is, I think, a really important point, that I think that a connected view of how to address climate change also gives us more hope, and it'll give us a sustaining force to move forward with this work. So I want to tell you a little bit about my trip to the South Pacific. So in September, I traveled down to the South Pacific to visit with some of our grassroots partners and conduct research for UUSC. I visited Papua New Guinea, and particularly an island off the northeast coast of Papua New Guinea called Bougainville. Now, our partners there are extraordinary, if I do say so, absolutely incredible. They have actually already had to relocate from the Carteret Islands, which are islands off the coast of Bougainville. They planned and executed their own relocation of an entire community, and they're working to bring more people from their communities to this new home, with frankly very little support from their government. Sometimes even folks getting in the way of their progress. They've negotiated for land, they've built their own homes, they've learned new agricultural techniques, and they've done outreach to share their culture with the culture of their receiving community so that they can have meaningful relationships there. Now, their struggle has been really unimaginable, I think, for a lot of us, and they continue to face hurdles at every turn, but they maintain an immense hope and energy in their work, because there is no alternative, right? There is only hope, really. You must move forward. A couple of things I want to tell you struck me almost immediately when I was in Bougainville. This place was one of the most beautiful places I've ever visited, and it reminded me eerily of home in Vermont, 9,000 miles away. I grew up miles up a dirt road, as I said, and Bougainville had these same sort of winding, undulating dirt roads. Felt very, very much like where I grew up. It was hemmed in on all sides by thick forest. Of course, in this case, it was tropical rainforest, but still had that kind of quilt feel of forest all around. I conducted focus groups with members of the community, including kids. So I had the kids work with me, and they each drew a map of things in their community that were meaningful to them. And one of the things that struck me so much was that many of the kids actually drew their tree, right? Sort of like I was when I was a little kid. I had a special tree. They had their special tree, a mango tree or a breadfruit tree that was a landmark for them in their community. So very, very similar. It really hit my heart how similar things were. But still, there are some major, major differences, right, between my experience growing up and my experience here, and our partners' experience 9,000 miles across the world. So our partners are almost all indigenous, as I mentioned. They're people who have, although they've moved, just to a new island recently, they're from this region. They're Micronesians from this region for thousands of years. Now in Vermont, only about 4% of people identify as indigenous. Many people who were indigenous to that region were pushed out about 200 or 300 years ago. And our partners, like most of the inhabitants there, have contributed very little to the kind of rampant carbon emissions that are really responsible for climate change. Now, I'll be perfectly honest in saying I know a bunch of people who, especially in Vermont, like to live off the grid. I know actually my fair share of people that live in teepees and yurts, right? They really move out there and try to be particularly crunchy, if you will. But I think that if we're honest with ourselves, all of us in the US have certainly contributed to and benefited from the Industrial Revolution, right? Mass production, electricity, the automobile, right? These things that we kind of take for granted. And our partners are a community of about 100 people with gravity-fed water, right? They certainly want to have running electricity, but they don't. They have a generator occasionally that they're able to run. No car. We actually had to rent a Land Rover to get there. I traveled to Fiji. I traveled to Solomon Islands. I traveled on to Bougainville in this set of airplane flights that I actually used a carbon calculator to measure. It said that I used 4.65 metric tons of carbon dioxide. When you think about that, that's 10,000 pounds to get to visit our partners. And our partners rarely travel off the islands. They tend to travel only for fishing and in small fishing boats. So this trip left me feeling deeply connected to our partners who are on this other side of the planet and who have very different circumstances, but also it made me realize, it made real for me, I think, in a way that I hadn't seen before. The ways that the people who have contributed the least to climate change are now facing the worst consequences, right, in a very real way. And the lifestyle and standard of living that I enjoy just by living here, right, not by my choices even, is directly connected to our partners and their displacement, right? It's just, there's no getting around that extremely uncomfortable reality. But we don't want to pause there. That's not where we stop, right? We have to move forward. So one of our partners, I just want to share one more partner with us, uses a really accessible curriculum for teaching about climate change, where they, this is in Kiribati, which is another small South Pacific island. They do a dramatic exercise. So imagine doing this. They have somebody smoke a cigarette, which of course, we shouldn't do, but they have someone smoke a cigarette, and they start covering them up with blankets, right? And they cover people up with blankets, and they cover them up with more blankets, and then they start to ask the person inside who's smoking, creating all this smog, what's it like? What's happening for you? And they talk about getting hot, and they talk about how they're sweating profusely, and they talk about how they can't breathe, right, because the air is filled with smog. And then they turn to the group, right, this is an educational exercise, and they talk about how this sort of relates to the way carbon emissions are impacting the globe. And I somehow naively kind of asked the director of this program, how do people respond to that? You know, thinking it would be new information for people, you know, so it's something really important. And it was interesting. These are the most hospitable folks I think I've ever met. And he turned to me almost shyly, right, and he said, they get angry. And they say, why are you talking to us? Why are you talking to the Americans? Why aren't you talking to the Australians? Right? And this is what our climate justice program at UUSC, your UU Service Committee, focuses on. Really, partnership and justice for those who are most severely impacted by climate change and have contributed the least to the problem. And that's why I'm here, really. In truth, people in Kiribati and Papua New Guinea don't want you or me to fix this problem, right? That's not what they mean when they say go talk to the Americans. What they mean is they want our governments to commit to fixing it. They want our major industries, right, to commit to fixing it. And they want to join meaningfully with us in fellowship on climate justice. So what can you do, right, to join with us, to join with our partners, our amazing partners in this work? Certainly, I would urge you, if you're able and willing, to become a member of UUSC. I'm so impressed and excited to know that about 20% of folks here already are members of UUSC, so that's fantastic, and thank you, thank you. But if you're not, certainly I would urge you to join with us as a member. I'd also urge you to join in different ways as well. So you can join our mailing list and learn about these issues. You can learn about advocacy opportunities that way. You can also follow us on social media if you do social media like Facebook and Twitter. That's certainly a good choice as well. But then there's some sort of more hands-on ways. So if you have youth in your life, particularly high school kids, I'd recommend that they look into something called the UU College of Social Justice. Now, the College of Social Justice has a program called Activate Climate Justice. And it brings high school students together to get their hands kind of dirty, learning about climate justice, even doing lobbying and other types of work, action and other types of work related to climate justice. And UU College of Social Justice also is just running a pilot program. After Hurricane Harvey in Texas, they created a program that was an alternative spring break for people to go back down and help rebuild in Houston. And Houston is an area, because especially in the industry, where you have a lot of environmental justice issues, where you have people of color communities who are disproportionately impacted by smog and other types of impacts that are also fueling climate change. And so this program that CSJ is going to be running will actually be open up to people of all ages, from all backgrounds, and people can go and engage in this kind of environmental justice work and also engage in things like rebuilding after the hurricane. So just a final point about hope, because I think with a lot of things that relate to climate change, it's difficult to maintain hope as we move forward. So climate justice isn't something that can be achieved individually or by people working separately from one another. I would argue we really do need to work together. It's our collective problem, and we can find our collective solution. And we do have a role to play in solving this. We actually need to join together for a number of reasons, and I'll just kind of list a few of them from different perspectives. So certainly, as I mentioned, we've certainly contributed. Not we personally, certainly, but we've contributed to and benefited from climate change in ways that some other people in the world certainly haven't. We also, hopefully, have some privilege and some influence that other people don't. Potentially able to, as we heard in the story for all ages, maybe work with our governments, right? Or try to work with corporations that are at least more closely related to us as consumers to change some of their practices. I also think it's important to join together because partnership gives us a clearer sense of what's going on, right, with climate change. And I think a sense that, as I mentioned with our partners in Papua New Guinea, that failure is not an option, right? We actually need to keep moving forward to find solutions. And I also think that coming together motivates us, certainly has for me. It sustains us, right? It gives us a sense that we have to move forward, and it gives us hope that what we're doing can make a tangible difference. Now, just beyond that hope issue, a growing percentage of Americans report worrying a great deal about climate change, which I think is a good thing, right? It's a good thing that people are worrying. That number's up to about 66% of Americans in 2017. Now, worry can be useful, I will grant you that. But I think we can also know that it can lead to hopelessness, right? It can lead to a sense that there's nothing I can do. This is too bad, right? And I think that it's fair that people feel that way. I mean, there was a recent study that showed that the Antarctic ice shelf might be melting much faster than we thought, and they used the term ice apocalypse to say that there will be this ice shelf breaking off and that it would cause major flooding in coastal cities. I mean, this is scary language. It's understandable that people would be overwhelmed. But connectedness, a justice-centered approach to climate change, can offer us a way forward. Final words. Activist Naima Penniman recounts how after Hurricane Katrina, quote, everything lost its footing. Houses were detached from their foundations, signposts and vehicles floated down the rivers and became the streets. But amidst the whipping winds and surging water, the oak tree held its ground. How? Instead of digging down its roots into the solitary earth, the oak tree grows its roots wide and interlocking with other oak trees. How do we survive the unnatural disasters of climate change, environmental injustice, corporate globalization, and displacement? We must connect in the underground. And in this way we shall survive. Right? I can attest to the ways that joining with grassroots partners in the underground, who are putting it all on the line in battle against climate change, can keep you motivated and committed to climate justice. Now, if climate change teaches us nothing else, it teaches us that we are all connected. Each of us, each of our nations, and our economy's impacts has direct consequences for people all over our small, wet planet. And we're connected and committed to finding solutions. You and me and our partners many thousands of miles away. Thank you so much for having me.